dissolved. But is it through legend, not science, that a genuine relic may be traced? Could one of the greatest legendary relics be found? The Holy Grail.
According to the Bible, Jesus ascended bodily into heaven, so consequently there were no items left behind of his bones on the earth to become relics. So it was things that were associated with him, splinters from the cross, thorns from the crown of thorns that were supposedly the relics associated with Jesus. But the most important relic of all would be if you could have some of Jesus' blood, because according to the Bible, Jesus at the very first communion, the very first Mass, the Last Supper, he turns the wine into blood. Now that is essential, the Mass of the Eucharist is essential to Christianity. So obviously anything containing Jesus' blood, if it still existed, would be the most holy relic of all.
The legend of the Holy Grail arose in 13th century romances, often with King Arthur and his knights. There were some 8 stories of a precious relic secretly hidden on the island of Britain, when Rome was attacked by the Visigoths in the 5th century. It has come to be known as the cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper. But in medieval romances, the picture of the Grail was confusing. Many tales tell of gallant knights and their quest to find the greatest relic of all. But what was the relic? Their stories disagree.
It was made from refined gold set with precious stones.
A magical stone.
A head, carved and fashioned in the likeness of
Christ, had written it himself, the book of the Holy Grail.
Over the centuries, this great relic has evaporated into the realms of myth and imagination. But did the medieval love of chivalry and adventure exaggerate a far less dramatic event? The Grail was said to have arrived in Britain in the 5th century, brought from Rome for safekeeping. History tells of another relic cup from Rome, the Marian chalice, which arrived in Britain at the same time. Could the two be the same? Helena, mother of Constantine, the first Christian emperor, brought back the Marian chalice, and unlike most relics, the cup leads directly back to Christ.
She travelled to Jerusalem and went in search of items that were associated with Jesus. Now she found a spot that she believed was the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus was laid to rest after the crucifixion. And there she claimed to have found, amongst other things, a small pot, a small little cup, which she believed had belonged to Mary Magdalene, that had been used by Mary to collect drops of Christ's blood after the crucifixion. Now, she took this little pot back to Rome, and it was put on display in what became the Vatican, and it attracted pilgrims from all over the Roman world to go there to touch this item in the belief that, because it once held the blood of Christ, that they could be cured of all manner of ills. Now, there's no way of knowing if this really ever did have any connection with Mary Magdalene, but the Empress Helena certainly thought it did, and it was this cup that I believe was the original inspiration for the story of the Holy Grail.
In 1992, Graham Phillips traced the history of the cup to the descendants of an old English family and to the Red Castle at Hawkston Park in Shropshire. A strange poem written by the owner about a famous knight, Sir Gawain, appeared to present a sequence of literary clues.
The first of the references read, "Thou art my rock and my fortress." Now, if you're actually standing where Gawain is at the end of the poem, you're standing on a fortress, the Red Castle. You then read the next verse, and it tells you, "Lead me to the rock that is higher than I." Now, from the Red Castle, there is only one rock which is actually higher than where you are, and that is the White Cliff at Hawkston Park. Then you consult the next reference, and it says, "Lead me through the gully, lead me across the mountains." Now, there's a gully which is right around the edge of the hill, which is the cliff that is higher, would eventually, cutting a long story short, lead you into this series of caves where we are now. And in these caves, until about the 1930s, there used to stand 4 statues: a bull, a lion, an eagle, and an angel. They were great big statues, about 6 feet high each. And the same man who wrote the poem left in a nearby church at Hodnet. He donated to the church a stained glass window, and the stained glass window has on it a bull, a lion, an eagle, and an angel. They're the 4 evangelical symbols for the 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And 3 of them are holding what you'd expect them to be holding, which was the book that they wrote, the Gospels. But the 4th one, John, isn't holding a book at all. He's holding a chalice. When eventually we discovered that the very same man, Thomas Wright, also had the 4 statues put into the caves, we then began to realise there must be some connection. And obviously, as John, the figure that's represented by the eagle, is holding the cup, perhaps in the eagle statue that the poem had led us to is perhaps something hidden.
Graham Phillips followed the clues. The statue had long since been broken, but a small cup had been discovered inside. Left for many years in a dusty attic, Phillips took it to be tested at the British Museum. It was assessed to be a Roman jar of the 1st century AD. Could this be an authentic relic? Could the story of Helena's finds be true? There is no conclusive evidence.
I think there was something like about 130 at last count. People came forward to claim that they had the real Grail, and you had every different shape and size. If you've seen the film, the Indiana Jones film, where he goes into that place and there's all those grails all over the table of every different shape and size, well, that's basically what all these grails look like. But interestingly enough, just like the one in the Indiana Jones film, the one I have, which is this small stone cup, is probably the simplest of all of them, which probably makes it, in my opinion, like in that film, the most likely one to be genuine.
The Grail remains a legend, but Helena is real. It's upon her word the monuments to Christ's Passion were built. Did she uncover the hiding place of Christianity's ultimate relics?
Alleluia.